In 1528, Anne Boleyn caught a disease so strange that it could take a healthy person's life in only 3 hours. While King Henry VIII ran away in panic, Anne's body was fighting the sweating sickness. This rare plague did not just cause heavy sweating. It did things to the human body that modern science still can't explain. Today, we're using Tudor medical records to reconstruct exactly what was happening inside Anne's body, hour by hour. One of the most unusual things about the English sweating sickness is who it affected. It often spared the elderly and the poor, while favoring a very specific group of people. Doctors at the time explicitly stated that this disease did not resemble anything described in the classical medical texts of Hippocrates and Galen, which were their main reference points. To this day, it remains one of medicine's greatest historical mysteries. The disease behaved like something straight out of a horror movie. The most reliable descriptions come from John Caius and Thomas Forestier, who personally witnessed outbreaks and wrote medical treatises about them. One account reads, "We saw 2 priests standing together and speaking together and saw both of them die suddenly. Also, we saw the wife of a tailor suddenly die. Another young man walking by the street fell down suddenly." Henry VIII's response to the epidemic was extraordinary by the standards of European courts. The sickness did not strike just once. It returned in 5 major waves across several decades. During the outbreak that affected Anne, panic consumed London. The royal court broke apart almost overnight as nobles and officials fled the city in haste. In June 1528, Henry's worst nightmare came true. At this point, Anne was not yet queen, but she was the focus of Henry's obsessive love and attention. It was not the first time someone he loved had been in great danger. Arthur, Prince of Wales, Henry's older brother, died in 1502, and many historians believe the sweating sickness was the most likely cause. When Anne caught the disease, Henry was terrified for her life. He was paranoid about catching the sweat himself and implemented a desperate plan to survive. He sent Anne away to her family home at Hever Castle and refused to see her in person. He wrote her anxious letters in a hurry, knowing the disease could take her life within hours. As reports reached him that members of his own household had already died, his fear drove him to take extreme measures. He slept in a different residence each night, attempting to outrun a disease no one understood. Henry had especially good reasons to be terrified, as the illness mostly hunted people like him. This was not a plague of filth. Unlike many diseases of the time, the sweating sickness often struck healthy, well-fed, socially active adults, especially men. Interestingly, the wealthier classes were affected more than the poor, which is highly unusual for an epidemic. But the symptoms themselves were even more shocking. How Anne's body must have reacted to the disease would have been absolutely unbelievable even to modern doctors. At the very start of the illness, people often reported one strong emotion. From their point of view, it felt emotional, but the truth was not what they thought. The body was already in trouble, and physical changes inside it had triggered the brain's alarm system. The frightening part was that it came without any warning. Everything about the English sweat happened shockingly fast, and that is not an exaggeration. People were often completely well earlier the same day, then died out of nowhere while eating or walking. For Anne, it likely began the same way it did for most victims. Modern historians and physicians think that the first symptom was likely a real physiological response to a sudden toxin or infection affecting the nervous system. People often felt a sudden, ominous sense that something was wrong before the main symptoms hit. That strong feeling of fear and terror was already known as the first sign that someone had caught the illness. But compared to what came next, this was only an innocent sensation. What followed was the opposite of what many people today imagine this disease to be. Many reliable summaries show that outbreaks of sweating sickness happened in late spring and summer, not winter. So when Anne and Henry were dealing with it, it was the part of the year that was usually among the warmest. Tudor people wore many layers of clothing, even in summer. Therefore, it was very strange when victims were suddenly hit with another symptom. This was not mild. Writers at the time described it as violent. Right after the fear, patients were struck by intense cold chills, as if the body had been seized all at once. But the third symptom was where it started to become brutal. John Caius describes the illness as flipping from cold to heat very fast, sometimes within minutes or an hour. What we need to understand here is that this was not normal fever sweat. It was far worse than people imagine, especially because of one specific sensation the victims felt inside their bodies. Visually, it would have been intense and frightening. There were no breaks, only hours of unrelenting sweating. Clothes and beds became fully soaked. Sweat ran down the face, chest, and back. Rooms smelled strongly of body heat and illness. In Tudor rooms with limited ventilation, this quickly created a stifling, humid space. The worst part was that patients did not feel relieved by the sweat. They felt burning inside. What is shocking is that this was far from all that Anne and others had to suffer through. There were several other symptoms no one would ever want to experience, and, as was common in previous centuries, the medical treatments used at the time made everything far worse. Henry immediately sent Anne his best physician, Sir William Butts. He had to be quick. The disease typically lasted through one full day before recovery or death took place. Anne's heart was one of the main targets of the illness. What she must have felt inside her chest reminds one of other known diseases, but it is still an incredibly scary thing to experience. Many deaths likely occurred because the heart was under extreme strain. This fits reports of people collapsing quickly, sometimes without clear outward signs. What victims felt was a heavily pounding heartbeat with pain. Intense thirst and headache were also very common, but this next final symptom, according to contemporary doctors, was the decisive factor in whether the person was going to die or survive. Tudor doctors feared it more than anything else and warned strongly against it, doing everything they could to stop the patient from letting it happen. They believed it weakened the heart and noticed that many patients died during it. At the bedside, everyone watched the clock as the hours passed and watched the patient's eyes. Attendants would have tried to talk to Anne and moved her during the most dangerous hours, all because it was believed that falling asleep meant certain death. This was not the only misunderstood way of treating the disease. Another treatment completely worsened the state of patients. John Caius thought the disease involved a poison attacking the heart. Doctors actually believed the sweat was a good thing, thinking it meant the poison was leaving the body. Once sweating began, physicians often felt cautious relief, thinking the illness had shown itself and could now be controlled. But in reality, their way of treatment had deadly consequences. Doctors at that time did not have a single cure for sweating sickness. They treated it using the medical ideas of the time. Here, the main solution dehydrated the body and worsened breathlessness. Windows in rooms were shut down on purpose. The idea was to sweat the disease out. Therefore, despite soaking in sweat already, patients were kept in very warm beds under multiple blankets. Although the most common advice in this case leaned heavily toward bed rest and sweating, sometimes they used an even worse treatment that was standard in Tudor medicine. Most university-trained medicine was built around humoral theory. It meant that if a person was healthy, their four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, were balanced. Illness meant imbalance, and the way to evacuate the body was absolutely stomach-churning. It required a surgeon or a barber, not usually the elite physician. The logic was to reduce something from the body that they believed there was too much of in it, and to draw harmful material away from the heart and organs. In reality, just like heavy sweating, it could weaken a patient very quickly. What they would do was to open a vein with a sharp tool and collect blood in a bowl or use leeches. This was called bloodletting. To understand the sweating sickness better than doctors 500 years ago, modern scientists decided to do DNA tests to once and for all understand the mysterious disease. The disease vanished after the 1550s and was never seen again, almost as if it were exclusive to Tudor England. Numerous attempts have been made to identify the disease's origin using molecular biology methods. Henry Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, died during the sweat epidemic in 1551, and his body was buried in a cemetery that still exists today. Because of this, there were plans to exhume his remains and search for the real cause of the disease. However, scientists concluded that it was unlikely any genetic material had survived, which is why all such attempts failed. Despite this, researchers developed several theories about what the disease might have been, with one emerging as the most likely. Some modern researchers have proposed that it was caused by an infection transmitted by certain mice and rats. The disease struck suddenly, was often severe, and appeared to surge and fade quickly, which some authors argue resembles hantavirus outbreaks. A detailed review has suggested that hantaviruses are the closest match among known pathogen families, while still acknowledging that this has not been confirmed. The truth is that we may never know what was really behind this strange plague. While Anne survived the sweating sickness, her marriage to Henry VIII turned out to be far deadlier. 8 years later, poor Anne was executed by the king, and what he did with her body afterward shows that cruelty was the only disease Anne truly should have feared. Watch the previous video to learn more.